My name is Nico. I won't say anyone else's true name for their privacy. A little backstory first. My wife, 30 years old, who stands 5 feet tall, maybe 110 pounds, and looks a lot like Penelope Cruz, but Lebanese. She's beautiful. To the point that I'm not sure why she's with me. Not that I'm bad looking. Just, you'll see. Then there's me. I'm 31 years old. 6 feet, 230 pounds. I'm very stocky, not fat. But not perfect abs either. I am a larger man. I'm also an ex-heroin addict who's been in prison a few times. For a couple of years longer than I'd have liked. I'm very suspicious of people, where my wife is more naive. She grew up in a nice area with money in Florida. I grew up in not the best of places in Boston, Massachusetts. We met 9 years ago through a friend, Johnny, who has since passed away, but because of my antics, we were short on money. I was either getting high with it or she sent money to the jails for me to eat well and call home. So for a while, we bounced around from family members' houses for some time. After 7 years of marriage, I cleaned up and was a free man again. A year later, we finally moved into our own place in Boston. It was kind of small for the price, but with my credit and my background check, it had to go in my name since I was the one with the pay stubs. It was all we could find. No one would rent to me being a convicted felon, but it was ours. It was a 1-bedroom, 3-room apartment with a sliding glass door leading to a small porch on the 3rd floor of a 7-story brick building. Now, the week of us moving in, we met the maintenance man, and even though I was primarily the one speaking to him, I noticed he wouldn't stop staring at my wife. I wrote it off because, honestly, not to sound vain, she is gorgeous. And I'm used to men staring, as long as that's it. He stood maybe 5'7" and maybe 175 pounds, a Puerto Rican or Dominican man with very broken English. Anyway, after a while of seeing him around the house, him and my wife became sort of friends. He would let her access the laundry for free, which at $6 a load, it was a nice break, and rides when I wasn't home. I work construction. I leave at 6 a.m. and return around 4:30 p.m. I am making good money, good enough that she didn't have to work. I figured I'd give her a break since she did so much for me over the years, of me running around, getting high and locked up. She was a saint for staying with me, always making sure I was as comfortable as I could, being in jail. But after a few months of living there, we came to realize that maybe there was something wrong with him. Not scary, more of an innocent mental thing. He was a bit off, but very functional, just a little weird. Like how flustered his English got when he spoke to her face to face. She told me since I wasn't there all the time. And just the awkward things that he'd say to her. Well, about 7 months into living there, the couple in the apartment next door, that shared the wall with our bedroom, moved out. It was empty while he worked on it, and he was there every day for 2 months to paint and change the rugs or whatever he did in there. But I thought it took him way too long to do it. But he was the only one working in there. By that time, him and my wife had exchanged phone numbers at some point, so she could get him there to unlock the laundry machines. Or get a ride. And no, I'm not jealous or a controlling guy, and I trust her to talk to whomever she wants. But while working next door, she told me that every day when she woke up, he started calling or texting. And it's not like he heard her moving around or the TV turning on, but the second she opened her eyes and sat up in bed, she said she felt like the phone would ring, with him calling around 9 a.m. every morning. Now, it may be a coincidence, or she thought he was listening at the wall, I don't know, but I do know that it got to the point that she started getting nerve-wracked, and she made me look for cameras stashed around the house, since we knew he had keys. I thought this was a bit extreme, but I did it anyway. and of course I didn't find any. She started getting worried or paranoid that he was stalking her, at least a little. He would pull into the parking lot that we could see from the balcony, blaring some sort of Spanish music and calling her phone if he saw her through the glass doors, which was creepy as fuck that he would be looking up at them anyways. And he always was around our door or hallway, or even coming out of the elevator a couple of times as she left the house. Our front door is directly next to the elevator, and we can hear it go up and down, or when the door opens, on our floor. It was almost as if he had been waiting out there for her to come out, and I agreed, for the most part, that yes, the situation was getting out of hand because I saw the call logs and the texts, and he also called when I was home. Not too late at night, but after he was done working in the building, like 7 or 8 p.m, when he was home. He didn't live in our building, and there was no reason that he needed to call, which got a little weird. She stopped answering his calls altogether. So he started making reasons to come to the house, like he'd show up with a new stove, and a light fixture, and a new AC unit. All shit we never asked for, and none of which were even broken in the first place. It was weird. He would come knocking on the door only before I got home from work, and would be asking for a drink while working around the building. Even once asking for a sandwich, which of course she made, because she was so polite, and since she had answered the door and he was in our home at this point. He started asking her out to lunch with him, and she politely denied the offer, and of course she told me all of this, and I, a little more than mad at this point, told her to just ignore him completely, or that I would get involved, which she begged me not to, since most of my encounters of getting involved included violence. And then me once again getting whisked off to jail. But she was happy that I wanted to help, but said she could handle getting him off her case. Around this time we had gone out for the night to dinner and the movies. We finally returned home a little after midnight, and I noticed a bottle of wine on top of the refrigerator. She didn't see it. Thinking my wife had bought it, I didn't say anything, or think anything out of the ordinary. A few nights after, she drank it with one of her girlfriends, thinking that I had gotten it for her. Then, about 2 weeks later, we were out again till 2 a.m, and came home and there were flowers on the kitchen counter. She saw them first, and thinking I was being a loving, just forgetful husband, she asked if I had gotten them for her and forgot to give them to her, like the bottle of wine of 2 weeks ago. To which I replied that I never bought her that wine or the flowers. I thought she bought the wine, and I had no clue where the flowers came from. At that moment I saw in her face what she was thinking. I knew she was scared, so was I, but couldn't show her. But her and I were creeped the fuck out. Who would have left these here? She's saying, trying to convince herself that it wasn't. Creepy as fuck. None of our friends could or would have left a full bottle of wine without us knowing. And I really should be the only one bringing home flowers for her. Plus the fact that both doorknob and deadbolt were both still locked both times. When we returned home made us nervous. We talked briefly that it had to be the maintenance man. Who else? No one could come and go so easily. Plus we lived on the 3rd floor, so no one is coming through the windows or sliding glass door. One time we were both out separately. She arrived home first and found it open, even though she knew I had closed and locked it from the inside with the bolt lock that couldn't be tampered with from the outside at all, even if someone had made their way up the building, but wrote it off as I must have forgot to shut it. After that there were no more presents, but minor things were missing from the house. Mostly her clothes. Not just underwear, but shorts, shirts, a hairbrush, what have you. And where none of my stuff went missing, we knew she wasn't just messing up the laundry. She knew she didn't just lose or misplace them, but, maybe I should have informed the landlord. He was a great old Italian man, Tony, about what had been going on. But I'm an ex-con, and telling on someone is not my thing. I grew up learning that you keep shit in-house and deal with it yourself, and definitely no cops, ever. Plus, we didn't have any proof that it was him. The only cameras in the building were at the front door, and one in the elevator, none on the upper floors. So what were we going to say? Hey, this guy gave us free laundry and may have left wine and flowers. Tony knew my background from checking it prior to us moving in. I figured he might have thought I was using again, or that we were just nuts and forgot buying the stuff and misplacing our shit. So we just left it alone. After a month of nothing really going on, she had relaxed, thinking that maybe he finally got it through his head that she was my wife and was not going to go out with him. We were terribly wrong. Because one Monday morning in the spring is when shit got totally out of hand. Us thinking that it was over. Stopped abruptly. This one Sunday, she luckily had spent the day at her parents'. She was there all day and night shopping with her mom and hanging out having wine and food. I was home and it got late, and I had to work the next day, so I'd pick her up after work the following day. Plus, having a full Sunday, day and night to myself, wasn't too bad either. I kicked back and watched some Family Guy and a couple of movies on Netflix, made myself some dinner, and finally, after talking to her, saying our love yous and good nights, I went to sleep. So like always, 6 a.m, I'm off to work. Another start of the week. Everything was a normal day, but at work around 8 a.m, we hit a gas line piercing a small hole in it and shutting down the entire job and having to evacuate the entire site. They had to call the gas company to have the gas crew come repair the pipe. My boss, knowing it would take hours to do, sent us all home for the day so not to have to pay 6 guys to stand around waiting for the gas company to come and fix it. I wasn't too unhappy to get a 3-day weekend either. On my way home, I called her. She was still asleep at her parents' house. I told her after a quick shower and change, I would call her again and figure out when to come get her. I arrived home around 8:45 a.m. Mind you, this is around the time my wife would usually be waking up had she been home. I saw the guy's van parked in its usual spot on the side of the building as I pulled into the parking lot, and didn't pay any attention to it. I parked in our assigned spot. I opened the back door and started my way upstairs, not thinking anything was out of the ordinary. But once I reached our door and put my key in the deadbolt, I felt that it was unlocked, which I knew that I was the only one that should have come through that door. She was still out, and I knew that I had locked it like I always did. Even when she was home, I would lock it. So she was nice and safe when she was home alone. This automatically made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I was instantly furious, thinking he had come, knowing we weren't home. Left us another present, all within a second. As I unlocked the doorknob and walked in, I knew something seriously fucked up was going on. I saw a pair of work boots on the living room floor as I walked in, and that our bedroom door was completely shut. I always leave it open unless we have someone spend the night. Also, with that door closed, even though it's not a huge apartment, you still can't really hear the front door being opened. I burst into her bedroom, and what I saw still shocks me to think about it. There he was in all his glory, on my bed, jerking off with one hand and holding a picture of my wife. I kept on the nightstand on the side of my bed with the other. His eyes widened, as he wasn't expecting me, which now I believe means he was expecting her to walk in. While I write this, I can't imagine what would have happened if she had come home alone and he was there. I know she would have been raped or even killed. It sends chills down my spine thinking what could have been. Okay, back to the story. So as I burst through the door, his expression of shock, fear and rage all show on his face as he begins to sit up. I know my face was definitely showing shock and rage. Without a thought in my head, I jump on him. Life in the streets and in prison has taught me a few things besides just how to fight. One is I react without thinking, especially of the consequences. And two, if there is a threat, make sure you get him before he gets you. He was butt naked, but I couldn't have cared less. I mounted him like a UFC fighter, throwing punch after punch as he hit me with that picture. Glass shattered everywhere. I could feel the hot blood running down my face into one eye, blinding me a little. After maybe landing 9 or 10 good punches, and him getting a couple off on me, plus the picture smashed on my head, he was out cold. I had knocked him unconscious, and were almost falling off the bed, both bleeding profusely, mine requiring 21 stitches from the glass cutting my forehead. His face was starting to swell up quickly as I got off him, and as he fell completely off the bed onto the floor, I took this opportunity to kick him square in his midsection, making him give out this huge gasp of air, as his breathing was already disturbed as a result of him being unconscious. Now, going against my upbringing, I called the cops. I mean, what the fuck? I had to. He was in my house, naked, bleeding, and starting to come to. I told them I had an intruder, and that I was holding him down waiting for them. And they arrived in minutes as we lived on one of the main roads in the city. They cuffed him, and tossed a blanket around him as he was brought out to the ambulance. They brought us to different hospitals in the city, so I could get my stitches and they could take my statement. After talking to the detectives, and only telling them about today, not the rest of the shit he mostly put my wife through, they both looked at me smiling, saying they wish they could have seen me jump on this naked guy, jerking off and throwing punches at him. We all started dying laughing. A few minutes later, my mother and father-in-law brought my wife to see me. She was crying and scared. They didn't tell her how hurt I was, just that I was okay. I told her how glad I was that I had come home early, and that it wasn't her instead. This experience was the most twisted thing I have ever been involved in. Of course, we have moved to a different part of the city, and he was charged with a bunch of shit, and took a plea deal of 10 to 12 years, and registered as a sex offender. I'm glad we both are okay. I couldn't have lived with myself if something had happened to her, and I could have done something prior to it happening. Thanks for listening to my story. As I said, this is 100% true, so be careful of who you meet. You never know who could become a fucking weirdo. To start off, I'm a female, and I grew up in a very small town. So small that, in my town, there is not one traffic light, and only one local store and one local pizza shop. One day years ago, when I was about 17 or 18 years old, and living with my mom and stepdad, we decided to order pizza from the local shop up the hill. My mom ordered the pizza, and I had to drive and pick it up. After putting my boots on and bundling up in my warm jacket, hat, and winter scarf, I walked out in the snowy weather to get in my car and drive to the pizza place. Just for clarity, I will describe the pizza shop. It is up on a hill on a narrow, sharp corner, and is set up like a drive-through, with quite literally nowhere to park, instead of one small space in front of the store. Continuing on, I pull up at the window and have the money ready to pay. A thin, older man with brown, scraggly hair opens up the window, and asks for the last name that the order was placed under. I give him a smile and kindly say our last name. He smiles a large grin and tells me it's not ready yet, that it will be a few minutes. I say, oh, okay, that's fine, thinking, no big deal, I'll just chill for a few. He then asks me if I would like to come in and get warm. When he says this to me, I happen to notice he's literally the only person in the shop, and is giving me the biggest, most menacing grin imaginable. I tell him, no thanks, I'll just wait in my car. He proceeds to ask again, multiple times. Keep in mind that it is strictly a pickup service, not where customers are supposed to come in and eat. At this point, I'm creeped out, and just want to say, listen, buddy, I just want to get my delicious pie and get the hell out of here. But instead, I smile sweetly, though feeling as uncomfortable as hell, and say, no thanks. He seems upset and says that it's very cold outside, and that I would be much more comfortable inside. Just pull up to the side some and shut your car off. I'll let you in from the side door. What the hell, is this guy for real? There's no way in hell I was coming in that shop with him. I tell him again, no thanks, I'm good sitting in my car. He seems upset and says, okay then, and shuts the window. A few minutes go by and I notice a man pacing back and forth in the shop, continuing to smile widely and stare at me each time he walked past the window. I'm weirded out by this point, so I act like I'm on my phone to avoid further interaction with this man. Eventually he opens the window and tells me the total while handing me my pizza. I give him the money and kind of want to just peel out of there. But my mom would have my ass if I don't bring her back the change. He comes back to the window with my change and before handing it to me says, you should have come in. The offer's still open. I give him a look that reflected, what the fuck? And grab the money so I can get the hell away from this creep. After driving home and walking in my front door, my mom sees a look of straight disgust on my face, and then I start to cry. She gets up and comes over to see what happened and if I'm okay, and I start telling her the whole story with tears just rolling down my face. I know I'm a baby, but it really scared me. After hearing about everything that happened, my stepdad is disturbed and calls the pizza man to confront him. After explaining the story to him and how it was completely inappropriate, the man, apparently the new owner, denied every single bit of it. He told him that he didn't know what he was talking about and that I was making it up. My stepdad gets off the phone with him to tell me, and my jaw drops completely. What was that man planning to do with me? Why would he lie and say he never said those things to me when he definitely did? Basically, it freaked me out, and I didn't go back to that pizza place for a long time. Still, to this day, 9 years later, that man owns that pizza shop. I wonder how many other girls he tried to get in his shop, or how many times he lied saying he didn't, trying to get women to go in there. It gives me shivers thinking about it. Before I start, a little backstory is required. This took place around a year ago. At the time I was 13. About 1.70 meters long. I have some kickboxing experience and I live in Latvia. I was on my skiing trip to North Finland, a place called Ulas. I lived in a city which was 200 kilometers away from the capital city, Riga. Unfortunately, my parents were unable to visit the trip with me, so they gave me 60 euros. For American listeners, $70, and told me that I had to meet up with my relatives which lived in Riga, the capital city, which meant I had to make my way with bus to Riga alone. The bus was slow, and it took 3 hours to cross 200 kilometers. The relatives were supposed to meet me up at Riga's bus station. On to the story now. The bus took off from the station, no big deal. An hour passes, nothing out of the ordinary, when suddenly I notice a strange, poorly dressed man sitting 2 seats in front of me. He was drinking at some moments. After 10 minutes, with the corner of my eye, I noticed him slowly scanning the area, like really, really slowly. Then his eyes reached me. He stopped, just staring at me for like a minute. Keep in mind, I was like 2 seats behind him, and that looked really weird. I was still ignoring him. Then he suddenly turned around. He seemed to be calling someone. We were only halfway yet, so I thought nothing of it. Then I realized he was talking for minutes, talking and talking and talking and talking. He hung up, looked at me again, and then called again, and kept talking. My guess, he was checking if I was alone. Since I'm white, and next to me sat an Asian-like guy, it would be easy to make out if I was alone. He was speaking quietly, so I couldn't make out what he was saying. It was weird, but thinking he was just drunk, didn't take it serious. Then he went quiet. After some time, we were about to board our destination. Everybody started packing up, so did I. I checked my pockets, if everything was in place. No problem. As soon as we stopped, I saw a gypsy group approaching the bus. Exactly our bus. The crowd slowly started to leave the bus. I was last to leave, since I had 2 sacks and 1 bag. Those gypsies were still there, constantly looking at the bus like they were waiting for someone. The group consisted of 3 grown men. I left the bus. Immediately, one of the group spoke to me. "Do you speak Latvian or Russian?" As soon as he spoke, the other 2 constantly started to look around, like if someone was about to interrupt them. They acted weird and stressed. My biggest plus in these situations is I never panic. I'm always calm. Only stupid me got into the conversation with them. I answered, "I'm Latvian." Avoiding eye contact, I politely answered in my mind. I was thinking, what the fuck do you want? And where is my relative? Then he offered me to shake his hand, saying his name. Now some of you may know the fact. When you look in the eye of a gypsy, you will lose control of yourself. And you will do anything he pleases. Being polite and coming from a behaved family. I thought that was some racist bullshit. So I shook his hand and looked into his eyes, as I was doing it. That was my biggest mistake I've ever done since I remember myself. I have never believed these theories or facts. Now I have the reason to believe too. I lost control of myself. Then he randomly told me, "Fuck all those Russians, fuck those parasites." I answered him, "Yeah, you're right." Something I would never say. The other 2 put some kind of random perfumes in my sacks. Then he told that he is from Turkey, that he needed money for gasoline and whatever to continue the road. Obviously that was bullshit. Guess what? I pulled my wallet out, and one by one I gave my paper money. All my 60 euros now were in his hands. He said nothing. I started to gain my control back. I felt really, really big rage waves flying from my head side to side. The group was about to leave. Suddenly I grabbed the guy's shoulder and very strongly pulled him back. I had my control back. He seemed to be confused. Ironically, I was staring into his eyes, anger all over my face, eyes filled with hate. I demanded, "My money, now!" He didn't say anything for like 10 seconds. Instead, he was making moves with his eyes very weirdly, like he had problems with his eyes or something. I was constantly staring at him all the time like I forgot about those other 2. He started to freak out. Honestly, he should have, because even though I was 40 years younger, I was still buffer and taller than him. And I was about to kick my leg into his face, not giving a fuck what those other 2 will do. And he knew that very well. After a weird 15 seconds of silence, finally he spoke. "Look, how much do those perfumes cost?" I answered to that. Do I look like I give a shit? Give me my money, or this day will end up shitty for both of us. That sounds funny coming from a 13-year-old, but as I said, I have some experience in kickboxing. and I was taller and buffer, which meant I had the advantage over him, and I'm good at not showing a single sign of fear. Silly that it worked, and he gave me my money back and took the perfumes out of my sacks. Then he very quickly started to walk with his group away. Honestly, I wasn't about to believe he gave me all my money back, so I counted it. Yep, €20 missing. $30. Then some kind of man came up. Let's call him Alan. He claimed to be from the police and asked if everything was okay. I told him everything that happened. Right then my relative showed up and found out what happened as well. The man started to shout after them to come back, surprisingly. One of the group's men came up. Obviously the one that didn't have the money. They started to scream at each other about the situation. Honestly, I was too tired to follow what they were saying. The gypsy guy left. Alan demanded that we must reach the nearest police post and write a report. It was a fucking mess. We walked like a kilometer. We finally reached the post in the shopping centre, Origo. As soon as we reached it, Alan told everything what he saw to the police officer, and then left. It was my turn to tell everything I saw. Then I learned that it was the 5th incident that happened this month. I said I would like to write a report. My relative was standing next to me. The police officer asked, "Is that your parent?" I answered, "No, that is my relative." Officer said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you must be with your parents to submit a report if you are under 18. And so we left, and went to my relative's house. I'm glad it was over. One feeling I'll never forget, the one when you're being controlled and you can barely do anything. My advice, if you believe in mysticism. Since then I started to believe. Avoid eye contact if anyone tries to rob you. I don't know why I didn't get paralyzed the second time. But I sure can tell that I feared him somehow. And I doubt that by my angry voice or face. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to my True Scary Subscriber Stories, Episode 2. I firstly want to apologize to the people who sent these stories in for keeping you waiting so long. I'm one of the smaller channels, so I don't get too many stories sent in to me at the moment. I currently have, not including these ones, I have 4 left, and I like to do 3 stories per video, so I was really just trying to space them out, hold on to them as long as I could. But I realize now that's not really fair to the people who are good enough to send them in to me, because obviously you send them in because you want to hear them, and sooner is much better than later. So what I'll do from now on is as soon as I get enough to do a video, I will do it and it will be uploaded. Probably as a Friday video. So what that means basically is next Friday there'll be another True Scary Subscriber Stories, and after that I've only got 1 left at the moment, so it might be a few weeks until the next one after that. So if your story doesn't feature in this video or the next video, it will be featured. It's just a matter of when I've got enough material to go with it. But if I don't get any other subscriber stories coming in quickly enough, not a huge problem. I can just pop it into one of my regular True Scary Stories video. There's really no reason it couldn't go there, is there? Anyway, I'm starting to ramble now, I think, so I'm just going to wrap up there. So again, thank you very much to those who sent me their stories in. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.